Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. And joining me, as he always does, for the THI Football Preview Podcast, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. AJ, we got another exciting show coming up. We got Deana coming on later for her Deana's Dandies segment. And we'll also be talking to John Dell from the Winston-Salem Journal and the Greensboro News Record. You can check his stuff out at journalnow.com. So really exciting show coming up. First things first, though, for AJ, Carolina's taking on Wake Forest this weekend in Chapel Hill. Noon kickoff in Kenan Stadium. Wake Forest is riding high right now, coming in on a 4-game win streak, coming off a bye week as well. They're sitting at 4-2 overall, 3-2 in the ACC. We all know how last year went as well, AJ. This could be a very tricky game for Carolina, and one in which Carolina they're going to have to show up for, because Wake Forest is a solid team, and it looks like they're on the up and up right now too.
By the time the Demon Deacons arrive at Kenan Stadium on Saturday morning, it will have been 55 days since they've lost.
So September sometime.
Now they haven't been beaten up murderers row, okay? But they're winning. They're winning football games, and they're winning football games the way Wake Forest wins, okay? They win by playing clean football. They win by not making mistakes and taking advantage of their opponent's mistakes. And that's from turnovers to teams that hurt themselves with penalties to teams that just have that bad series here and there. Wake special teams have been clean. They do a lot of the quote-unquote little things well, and that's one of the reasons Wake Forest is 4-2. The last loss was a 3-point loss at NC State, and that was a game, quite frankly, that throughout I thought Wake was going to win. Yeah, I bet you if that game's played today, Wake has a better chance of winning than they did then. And you could argue, Jacob, that this might be the best team UNC's played all year, because if they line up next to State and Boston College, and maybe even Virginia I think is better than their record. You might not think that Wake is better, but because Wake simply doesn't hurt itself, you can make the argument that this might be the best team Carolina's played so far. I would probably still go BC, maybe State a little bit, but this is a team that could certainly come into Chapel and beat the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I think it's definitely up for debate in Carolina, this being maybe the toughest opponent we could play, but I don't think it's up for debate that this is probably the hottest opponent that Carolina's played right now, like you said, when you consider they just haven't lost in over 50 days. So definitely a tricky opponent this weekend for North Carolina. We talked to Mack Brown on Monday during his weekly press conference, talked to the coordinators as well. One thing that he's really been stressing over the past couple of weeks in particular, and he did it again on Monday, was the importance of his team putting together back-to-back games. We've seen games when Carolina's played well and followed it up with a disappointing loss and vice versa. That's really something that Mack Brown, you can tell, is trying to, stress to his team, how important it is for them to, put back-to-back games together. It's not an easy opponent, but is that kind of Carolina's main focus in there? Let's take care of ourselves. Let's do what we need to do to be successful, and let's see if we can put 2 good weeks back-to-back and just kind of see what happens after that.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And I wrote a column after the Duke game saying, hey, look, one thing we've learned through 20 games of the Mack Brown Part 2 era is this program responds well to bad performances. They did it several times last year, and they've done it now after FSU and after UVA. They've played their 2 best games of the year the following week. Now they go into game number 21, and one of the things they need to begin doing is playing well back-to-back weeks. Now, they did have some good wins last year in consecutive weeks, but this is different now. This is middle of the season. This is a different team. They haven't yet had that real good performance back-to-back weeks, so it is imperative that they play well. They're going to need to play well to win. So if they do win, that means they played well. And I think it's another sign of growth. They're still checking off that laundry list of things that as they grow and climb that mountain, so to speak, and this is the next thing. But the task at hand, Jacob, is don't beat yourself. Don't make mistakes that ruin your own drives or, pull touchdowns back or extend their drives. Don't turn the ball over. Mack did not take Sam out of the game at the end of the third quarter at Duke because he threw an interception, probably an ill-advised throw. He put it back in there because he doesn't want his quarterback, this last rep, being an interception. Now, Sam's been really, really good this year, but my point is, even 1 or 2 mistakes like that, Wake could seize on it. So the Tar Heels need to get better during the course of this week, and the mission has to be themselves. And, playing well back-to-back weeks. If you're a Carolina fan, you're watching this, and you're just kind of soaking in the growth of this program in the second go-around for Mack, This is a big deal. Doing this is very important because you can't get to that next step on the ladder until you firmly put your feet on this particular step.
Mm-hmm. AJ, focusing on Carolina going into the game. Huge performance against Duke last week on the offensive side of the ball. What do you think Carolina needs to do offensively to be successful against Wake Forest? Is it just a case of let's just keep doing what we're doing? Because Carolina's had some really good games on that side of the ball over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I think that they've gotten to a point now where they've been over 500 yards for 5 straight games.
Yeah.
The worst game from an offensive yardage standpoint was at BC, 401 yards.
Still pretty good, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're averaging just about 46 points and about 575 yards in the last 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's who they are. Now, they hurt themselves sometimes, and when you have a defense that can give up, catastrophic plays and give up a lot of points in a hurry, the offense needs to be even better. So they have to improve. They have to play at a very high level right now going into a game in order for them to win, because you don't know what the defense is going to do. So I think the offense will be fine. I think this game, if Carolina loses, can be lost on special teams. It can be lost on defense and silliness.
Mm-hmm. What about defensively, AJ? I mean, I think the defense, we talked about a few moments ago, just kind of about putting 2 weeks together of positive. That's kind of what this team is trying to focus on. Seems like the defense is kind of a smaller example of that, where they have these good performances and then bounce back with some so-so to sometimes bad performances. What do you think they need to do this weekend to be successful?
Well, they need to stop the run. They need to stop that delayed RPO that Wake likes to run. And if the offense can get on the board quickly, get a couple of touchdowns up, maybe force Wake to play a little bit out of character, that's how they turn what could be a close game into a lopsided victory, which is certainly possible. Make Sam Hartman beat you with his arm. He hadn't thrown a pick yet, okay? And I think all season, Wake has attempted 172 passes as a team, no interceptions. So maybe the law of averages are on Carolina's side.
Yeah, that might be true.
They haven't been getting a lot of picks, but they did get 2 turnovers at Duke, and Carolina is around even in turnovers. They might be -1 or +1 in turnovers on the season this year, but they haven't been giving it up a lot, but they haven't been forcing a lot. So I think, make Hartman beat him with his arm, because I think Wake's running game is pretty solid. They got a couple of good backs, and they have a scheme that confuses teams, and certainly confused Carolina a lot last year. You got to be really disciplined, especially in the middle of the defense, and you got to have great gap control, and that's been an issue for Carolina. So stop the run enough, get some points on offense, and make them try to beat you with the throw. I think Carolina will be in good shape.
For sure. I definitely agree, AJ. Well, that's going to do it for this segment. Coming up next, though, we've got one of my favorite segments on the show, Deana's Dandies. So without further ado, here's Deana.
It's Wake and Carolina. Wake Forest, they have around 25 kids from North Carolina on the roster. Be talking about 4 of those guys. They're all offensive guys. They're all playmakers. You got to start with their quarterback, Sam Hartman from the Charlotte area. He started his preps career at Davidson Day under Coach Chad Greer, and then when Greer left to go to South Carolina down in Charleston, Hartman went with him, finished his high school career down in South Carolina, but I still consider him a North Carolina kid. Had a lot of success there at Davidson Day in Oceanside. He's done a good job at Wake Forest as well. He's got a good tandem of wide receivers. Jaquil Roberson from Hertford County. He's the Wake Forest's leading receiver. On the other side, they have Donovan Greene, who is from Mount Airy High School. Greene was a big target for UNC. UNC was really recruiting Donovan, but he stayed closer to home. Mount Airy's about 25 minutes away from Winston-Salem, so he stayed there. And then Wake Forest always has good luck in getting kids from their own county, Forsyth County, and that's where Christian Bill Smith from East Forsyth had a great career there for the East Forsyth Eagles, and he's having a good year for Wake Forest. And those 4 guys you need to keep an eye out on for Wake Forest, as they are the Demon Deacons' main threats on offense. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff from Deana, as always, during her weekly Deana's Dandies segment. Deana, you mentioned that Wake Forest has got about 25 guys from the state of North Carolina. It's a lot more than the likes of Duke had. I was actually a little bit surprised. I figured two private schools like that might have similar kind of recruiting backgrounds in the state, but it's actually a pretty big difference between the two. What type of kids does Wake Forest tend to go after in the state of North Carolina? Are they kind of going for those 3-star guys? Do they ever land any of the 4-star guys? What's kind of their what kind of kids are they going after in the state?
Well, they go after kids local. Like I mentioned, the Forsyth County kids, they've had a lot of success in their own county, East Forsyth especially, and then the areas outside, with Donovan Greene being about 25 minutes away. You know, they one kid we didn't get to speak about who opted out, Sage Surratt.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a game this would have been, a kind of a revenge game for Chaz, but high academic. I mean, Sage was, you know, he was formerly committed to Harvard. So it, like Andrew's spoken before, Duke and Wake, they go after the guys that fit their culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Dave Clausen's culture is one where you come here and you're going to get coached up big time. And they coach guys up. You look at the things that they do, they teach very well there. So they want kids in there that are going to learn, kids that will buy their time, if you will. I know that Jim Grubb, I covered him a lot when he was at Wake Forest. And one of the things that was really interesting is when you kind of have an opportunity to sit down with him and he would talk about redshirting everybody. They were really well known for having fifth-year seniors. Wake was just older than everybody else. Clausen doesn't redshirt as much, but there is some gravitas in that program. They replace good players well, better than you would expect Wake Forest to do. And a big part of that is getting in solid players, but also getting in kids that embrace the culture and stick around. And Deana's right. You know, I think Sage Surratt is an example of a guy who would have maybe gone to North Carolina had UNC offered. There's a lot of guys at Wake that want to stay close to home, that maybe don't get pursued as heavily by state and UNC or regionally by the Virginia Tech, Clemson programs. And they go to Wake, they got a little chip on their shoulder, and it works out well for them. It's a solid program.
Yeah, and if Dave Clausen keeps winning like he's done, over the past few years at Wake Forest, I mean, they're going to continue to get some really good recruits and, get even more interest from some of the top kids in the state, I would think. So yeah, great stuff, Deana. Really appreciate you coming on here and doing that for us.
I want to throw one more thing out real fast, if you don't mind, because I think I really enjoyed the Sam Hartman part of your Dandies, and I had forgotten that he actually went to South Carolina and played for Greer's dad. What do you recall a little bit more about that? You were telling us a story before we started taping this about him. Kind of fill everybody in on that, because I think that's a really fascinating backstory.
Well, he's actually the kid that followed Will at Davidson Day, and what high expectations did Sam have when he was following Will? And then Chad, Coach Greer, he got the coaching job down in South Carolina in Charleston, and Sam wanted to play for Coach Greer, so they had the means that they just let him go down there with him. But Sam, when he was in North Carolina, he had a really big medical issue where he had a neck issue that really was kind of life-threatening, and it's just awesome to see him recover from it and go back and be on the football field and help Oceanside with a great season down there. And now he's excelling at Wake Forest. So I know Coach Greer and his family, and he treats Sam Hartman just like another son.
And by the way, he's a great example of patience pays off.
Yeah, absolutely.
He could have bolted, and he stuck around, and now he's the guy. And by the way, he hadn't thrown a pick this year.
It's pretty good.
You could say 100 times over, the guy hadn't thrown a pick this year. So
yeah, Wake Forest has had some good quarterbacks over the past couple of years, especially. But yeah, I can't blame Sam for going down to Charleston for 1 year in high school. Man, I would have ate that opportunity up real quick if I had the opportunity. That's one of my favorite cities on the East Coast. So can't blame him at all for going down there for his senior year. Well, that's going to do it for us in this segment. But next up, we got John Dell from the Winston-Salem Journal coming on to chat a little bit about UNC's opponent this weekend in Wake Forest. So without further ado, here's our interview with John.
All right, right now we'd like to welcome in our very special guest. He covers Wake Forest for the Winston-Salem Journal / Greensboro News and Record. As the changing times and newspapers expand out the names, you're writing for a lot of people. Your stuff is in a lot of newspapers around the state, John. So a lot of folks have been reading your work about the Demon Deacons. So let's dive right into it. Offensively, a stat just jumps out. No interceptions thrown by Wake Forest this year. So obviously that's one thing they're doing well. Kind of talk a little bit about that and tell us what some of the other things that Wake is doing well on the offensive side of the ball, and maybe a couple concerns that you have that maybe things haven't gone so well for the Deacons there.
Well, first of all, they run the ball very well. They've got, much like Carolina, they've got two outstanding running backs, Kenneth Walker and Christian Beal-Smith. Sam, Hartman hasn't had to throw the ball a lot. So that's, I think, the reason that there's not a lot of interceptions, and none in interceptions, as a matter of fact. But Sam's just making great decisions. And I think, the receivers have been, they haven't dropped many, even though they've got a whole new corpse of receivers that are, getting much more playing time this year. It's just the nature of the running game that kind of sets up the pass. And they do this kind of veer offense where the running backs kind of hesitate on the handoffs. It's pretty funny, not funny, but very effective because these running backs can pick their holes. And it's been working great, especially the last 4 games. I mean, they're on a 4-game winning streak. So the defense is also playing well. They're controlling the ball. They've won high-scoring games. They've won low-scoring games. So Dave Clawson has really got a team that can do it both ways. And I think that's, one of the strengths is they can do it either way, either low scoring or high scoring. And I think they're going to have to score a lot of points to beat Carolina.
They had a lot of success last year against Carolina with that. I don't know what they call it, the delayed handoff. The Carolina really struggled with their discipline on that. And of course, different quarterback running a lot of those plays, but nevertheless, it threw Carolina off. And as much as they're struggling against the run this year, I would imagine that might be an advantage for Wake going in.
Well, I guess it's the run-pass option because they do a lot of RPO kind of thing. They do a lot of passing out of that too, where they fake the handoff and kind of holds it in there, and then he can pop a short one. And Sam Hartman is really making some good decisions. And you realize I keep saying Sam Hartman because Sam Howell, and we can get them both confused. And they're actually pretty good friends, I guess, from the Charlotte area. But Sam Hartman's been he's kind of been very impressive to me in his decision-making. But, yeah, that last year I actually followed athletic director John Curry around that whole game. That was my assignment to follow him around. He had just started. So that I didn't see much of the game. I was, trailing him the whole game. And so that reminded me of last year's game, at Wake Forest.
Yeah, it was quite the game last year as well. That was a good one to say the least. But John, let's focus on the defensive side of the ball for a second. What are some things Wake Forest has done well on that side of the ball, and maybe some things that are causes for concern so far this season?
Well, I just looked it up. Carolina's averaging 537, 538 yards. The defense is going to have to play even better than it has. But what they've done is they've got better play from the defensive line. They started out 0-2, and they struggled against Clemson, and NC State in a high-scoring game. But these young secondary guys, Nick Anderson has been tremendous, a true freshman, a walk-on who has 3 interceptions, and he's playing lights out. He wasn't even an any-star recruit, and he walked on to Carolina or walked on to Wake, and he's going to get a scholarship in the spring. And they're getting other production from a lot of young guys. And I think in this COVID season, that's helped Wake Forest because they're not having to save these guys to redshirt. It's basically a free year. So they started 3 true freshmen in the secondary in one game because they don't have to save them. Dave's using a lot of personnel on defense. The linebackers have gotten a lot better. I guess the concern I would have maybe is if Carolina gets off to a fast start, 21-0, 14-0, whatever. That sometimes that could have a effect on a team, especially on the road. But there's not a lot of fans, so it's not like it's going to be loud. But no. I just think if they can hang, and it's a high-scoring game, then I think Wake Forest defense will gain some confidence.
We talked to UNC offensive coordinator Phil Longo on Monday, excuse me, and he was just raving about how well coached Wake is, and especially on the defensive side. He's like, I haven't been to their practices, but I can imagine they're doing this drill, that drill, and that drill. strip drills, taking the ball away drills. They're 15-1 in turnover ratio. So as impressive as it is that the offense isn't turning it over, the defense is getting the teams to turn it over either through the interceptions, fumbles. What are they doing that has made them so effective at flipping the field on a lot of people?
Well, they have a good punter. That helps. And I think the discipline factor comes into play. They don't have a lot of penalties. I think they're maybe fourth or fifth in penalties. And Dave Clawson said something interesting to all of us is, they've been on campus since July and basically have done nothing but practice. Now they've had classes and stuff, but they haven't had any social life. They don't do much anything other than football. So I think to be in a disciplined team in the COVID era has really paid off. And Wake is kind of like that in all, Clawson's seventh year. They've done that every year. And I think more than anything this year, they've even become more disciplined. Like we mentioned earlier, there's no crowd noises, very few false starts. I mean, if they get a false start, you really have had a mental error because there's no crowd noise. So it's kind of amazing to me that they've had 15, takeaways and 1 turnover. And, Dave doesn't like to talk about it. He doesn't want to jinx it. So he just says, yeah, next question. So it's an interesting how well they've done in kind of a sloppy kind of, you've seen some games that, they're turning it over every other play, and it just hasn't happened at Wake Forest so far.
Yeah, conversely, Carolina has been troubled by the penalties, a lot of huge penalties, lots of personal fouls that have extended opponents' scoring drive. So what does Wake need to do to beat the Tar Heels?
Well, they need to run the ball. If Sam Hartman has to, win the game, that he hasn't had to do that yet with his arm. So that might be, something that they're going to have to watch. If they can run the ball effectively and, interchange those running backs, Christian Beal-Smith and Kenneth Walker, they can win this game. I think Wake has a 4-game win streak. It's the quietest winning streak in the nation. I don't think anyone even realizes it. But if they can run the ball, set up the pass, play that sound defense as they've, been doing, they can beat Carolina. And, it was done last year. So I think it's going to be a real good game and a noon game. And if it's a high-scoring game, it'll get over with, about 5 o'clock? Is that how long it's going to last? But it's definitely going to be, I think, a close one. And
by the way, they're very close to having a 5-game winning streak.
Yes.
So they haven't lost since September 20th. It's nearly September 13th. So they're looking at almost 2 months since they've lost.
Yeah.
Well, another interesting thing is they're coming off their 3rd bye week because of the Notre Dame game that got moved to December. So I really think this bye week, and I don't like to call it a bye week because that's a tournament. They didn't get a tournament bye. It's a weekend off. But I think this weekend off came at a good time because they had some bumps and bruises that they got to heal up. And I think, it bodes well for Dave to have a couple weeks to prepare for Carolina because I know they can be explosive.
Yeah, for sure.
He's John Dell, Winston-Salem Journal and Greensboro News Record. Check out his stuff. Go to journalnow.com. You can read all of his work on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. And this is a good week to do that because they're taking on Carolina this weekend. Thanks for stopping by, John. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks,
all right,
John.
you too.
Great stuff from John Dell from the Winston-Salem Journal and the Greensboro News and Record. Really appreciate him coming on, taking some time out of his busy day to talk about the Demon Deacons. AJ, kind of based off of what John says, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was how this is a well-coached Wake Forest team. This is a team that doesn't beat itself, doesn't make those mistakes, doesn't have a lot of penalties, doesn't turn the ball over a lot on the offensive side of the ball. Something that Carolina's kind of, on the contrary, kind of struggled with at times this year. Silly penalties, turning the ball over, just being a little bit undisciplined at times. Also, that Wake Forest delayed RPO is something not only Carolina really struggled with defending last year in Winston-Salem, but that's something that a lot of teams in the ACC and across the country also struggle with as well. So, I mean, AJ, based on what John said, I think this is a tough game for Carolina and one that they're definitely going to have to be ready for.
And I like this challenge for UNC in that, okay, last week we said, look, you've got maybe the best rush ends in the ACC, one of the best pass rushes in the country in Dukes. And that was a major point of emphasis, as Phil Longo told us. Carolina, they stressed it all week long. They tweaked a few things. Sam got sacked once. So they responded well to it. This week, they've got to be clean. They got to be much clearer than they've been. Even the other day against Duke, they had 6 penalties, but it was for like 80 yards.
Yeah.
They had 4 personal fouls. 3 of them were on drives that Duke eventually scored points on. So Wake Forest will take advantage of your mistakes. Wake may not walk in and overwhelm you in any element of the game, although that delayed run gave them trouble last year. But they got a different guy. I mean, I like Sam Hartman a lot, but he's not Jamie Newman on that thing. He's not as big, not as fast, doesn't run as well. But otherwise, Wake beats teams because they seize on their mistakes. If you're 8 penalties and Wake's at 2, and you're at 3 turnovers and Wake's at 1 or nothing, they've only turned it over once all year, so you would guess none. That's how Wake wins games. You cannot beat yourself. You cannot give them opportunities because they're really good at taking advantage of that. They're very efficient in a lot of the special teams areas. They just do a lot well. Carolina's coaches on Monday were gushing about how well coached and disciplined Wake Forest is, and they weren't throwing out coach speak. It really is the case. So, and hearing what John's saying, that's it. I mean, even with the freshmen that were playing in the secondary, they bring guys in, they coach them up. We talked about that with Deana's Dandies, and we talked about it with John. That's what they do. This is a very well-coached team. Carolina must be ready to play, and they must be sharp.
Yeah.
Can't do silly things because Wake will make you pay for it.
They will. They definitely will. Last thing before we end the show, AJ, I've seen a lot of chatter from Carolina fans, especially about this kind of being a revenge game from Carolina. And this was a game last year at Winston-Salem that did not go well for Carolina. They had a good second-half comeback, but it was a really poor first-half showing from them. And it kind of ended that honeymoon period under Mac Brown when you consider Carolina starts off with that win over South Carolina, and then they bounce back with a big win over Miami and Chapel Hill, and then go down to Winston-Salem and really just lay an egg, particularly in that first half. Do you think that plays a little bit of a factor for Carolina, maybe give them a little bit of advantage? Just there's a lot of guys from last year's team that were there. Do you think that maybe gives them a little momentum going into this game, a little bit more to play for?
I think they'll be reminded Saturday morning, but I don't think they're thinking about it during the week. And I think the honeymoon went into this year. I think the honeymoon
Could be true,
ended in Charlottesville about a week and a half ago.
Good point.
And that's okay because it was going to have to end at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's memorable about that game last year is how Carolina did get punched in the mouth by Wake. And that's a different Carolina a year ago. They were 2-0, they were riding high, but nobody really knew yet what they were. They didn't really know yet what they were. Mm-hmm. And Wake did punch him in the mouth with that run game. And they were pretty physical on defense. I remember Carolina had a lot of 3-and-outs there for a while. Sam didn't look sharp for a while. And they ended up making a push late. I don't think that revenge is that big of a deal. Like, Carolina's got so much to focus on right now. They have so many things that they need to clean up and they need to improve on. I really believe that the real mission inside the Keenan Football Center right now is just get better. I said it last week, and I hate to be redundant, but sometimes redundancy is real. Just get better. Mm-hmm. Mac actually said something about this on Monday where, you scheme for your opponent, you prepare for your opponent, but they just got to get better. Mm-hmm. This is a process. They're 20 games in, so there's plenty of intel to judge the program and this team, where they are, and some of the players. But at the same time, it's still very much a part of the process. If they get caught up in revenge against Wake Forest, I don't think that's the best approach.
Yeah.
That'll be like the added thing Saturday morning, when they're in pregame meal. Oh, by the way, remember last year? Show a couple of clips. That's all you need, because the rest of the week is about fewer penalties. It's about making gap control and run fits on defense. It's about young guys getting reps. As of the time of this recording, we don't even know who's going to play center. They might be getting Kieran Johnson a whole heck of a lot of reps in practice to get ready to play at center this weekend. We don't know if Brian Anderson's going to play. They got plenty on their plate to worry about than to be overwhelmed with thoughts about what happened in Winston-Salem last year.
Speaking of Winston-Salem last year, I know you remember that post-game interview up there. You got Dave Clawson blaring on the Jumbotron. Do you remember that, AJ? Dave Clawson's
music.
Post-game interview was blaring on
music.
And there was music playing, and we're over here in the corner of the end zone trying to talk to Mac Brown. I swear I heard 3 words he said.
I didn't hear anything.
I know.
Even when I played it back, trying to transcribe, I could barely hear what he was saying. And the players. I think they eventually turned it off. We got a couple. They got Aaron Crawford dropped a couple of cuss word bombs there. And they were ticked off after that. But, that was not the best setup in the world. I've covered a lot of games over there, and the visiting team is often done outside. But what was really weird, I did a game when Purdue was there about 12 years ago, and Joe Tiller had a press conference in an actual press conference area.
Yeah.
So I don't know why Joe Tiller, former Purdue coach, is special, but I did Dabo outside. The players right in front of the buses.
Mm-hmm.
So the bus fumes are overwhelming us. This is Taj Boyd, and they had a rope. So there's a bunch of us trying to lean over to get to Taj Boyd, and the buses are humming. They're loud, and the fumes are overwhelming us. We got like 5 questions in with Taj, and he had to get the heck out of there because he couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
It is what it is, man. That's the most said thing of 2020.
It is, man.
Other than 2020 or it's 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way Wake is over there.
I had to bring that up before I ended the podcast because I think that was the most unique, and I guess unique would be a good way to put it, post-game press conference. I've been in some interesting – That was in particular a weird one. So I guess we won't have to worry about that this weekend. But
underneath the stands at Florida State a long time ago, which was really weird with condensation dripping. ECU on the road is not really fun. Maryland back in the day, right out in front of the field house at Bird Stadium, and there's parents and family around. You're trying to interview a kid, and there's mom tugging at the kid's arm. It was.
It's crazy, man.
They're like that at Duke, too, by the way. Duke used to be outdoors. Mm-hmm. They had the high school walk at Duke where you go a long way from the visiting locker room to the field, and we used to do everything outside there except the head coach. And even actually back in the Bunning days, I'll never forget John Bunning. I know you didn't ask about Duke, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but whatever. But John Bunning's his last game was at Duke, and it was outside, and there's just family around. There's like a little kid next to me, and I'm trying to record Bunning. And it's outside and there's noise. So he's given like an 1880s stump speech and basically said, he gave 3 or 4 comments about the game and then said, hey, if anybody wants to tell my story, write a book, give me a call.
Oh, man, that's great. That's great.
His postgame was like a minute.
Famous last words. That's a good way to end your last press conference, man. I mean, I got respect for that. If anybody wants to write a book for me, just text me. That's great stuff, man. Well, we won't have to worry about it.
By the way, I didn't text him.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I did later on. I got to know John a little bit better later on.
Really
good guy, but
yeah,
I didn't want to tell that story at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that's going to do it for the THI football preview podcast. Really appreciate Deana coming on here and doing her Deana's Dandies. Also great talking to John earlier as well. As always, guys, if you've enjoyed the video, be sure to like it. Be sure to share it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.